all of those need different mindset, and asking someone to shift mindsets in every phone call. We used to call them schizophrenic octopus. That's what an office manager needs, because you never know who's calling, because there aren't designated lines always. And those are those emotions that you're eliciting in your employees. Those you can't buy those. That's just magnetic. When you entice people, or I should say, when you bring that up in their world, that's a magnetic field that you just can't create by saying, "Oh, I'm going to pay you more than anybody else." So it just means that as the owner, if you're going to give someone free rein to solve a problem, you have to paint a very vivid picture of what the outcome is. And that has to include parameters like your patient can't die.
Hello and welcome to the How2Exit Podcast, where we introduce you to a world of small to medium business acquisitions and mergers. We interview business owners, industry leaders, authors, mentors, and other influencers with the sole intent to share with you what it looks like to buy or sell a business. Let's get rolling. And now a moment for our sponsors. This episode of How2Exit is brought to you by Final Ascent, the boutique M&A firm helping lower middle market business owners achieve their ultimate exit. At Final Ascent, they know selling your business is one of the biggest decisions you'll ever make, and they've been in your shoes. Their team isn't just made of advisors. They're experienced business owners who have successfully navigated their own exits. Final Ascent specializes in preparing businesses for sale, building value, and connecting with a national network of qualified buyers who will compete for your business. They don't take on a client unless they're confident they can sell your business at the current market maximum value. Whether you're ready to sell now or planning for the future, they'll craft a roadmap tailored to your unique goals so that you can walk away with maximum value and a peace of mind. Start your journey today at Final Ascent. That's www.finalascent.com, because your next chapter starts with a successful exit. I want to highly recommend you get Acquisition Aficionado magazine. Every month, Acquisition Aficionado magazine brings you tactics for business buying and selling you won't find anywhere else. Learn firsthand from industry leaders who share their success stories, featuring in-depth interviews and stories from leading figures in the business acquisition industry. This multi-platform mobile magazine speaks to acquisition entrepreneurs wherever they are in the journey. And I want you to visit acquisitionaficionado.com today. Hello and welcome to the How2Exit Podcast. Today I'm here with Dr. Ruth Mannschreck, and she is a dentist by previous trade, but she's also a business advisor and really helps a lot of small businesses perfect their business in such a way that it's sellable and scalable. So I'm looking forward to having this conversation with you today. And I didn't even ask you, should I call you Dr. Ruth or...
You know what? Ruth is fine. I was doctored for 30-odd years, so I'm doctored out. I'm just good at Ruth.
Ruth, okay. I can't say Dr. Ruth without having the vision of the old Dr. Ruth too. So we're not having that conversation, people. She's a teeth doctor, wrong side, right?
Right.
So okay. That said, you've got a lot of experience in this space. What caused? Let's start with your origin story. We always start there. Kind of what started you down the path of I want to help other business owners prepare and make their businesses viable in the buy and sell market.
Well, I had been practicing for a few years, full-time, 5 days a week. We had 2 little boys, and then our daughter was born, and she had a very traumatic birth. She was in intensive care for about 6 weeks after she was born. And when she came home, she had to see 8 doctors every week, and that was not going to work with my 5-day-a-week schedule. So I went to my team and I said, we have to cram everything we do into 2.5 days a week because I have to be here for this child. And we did it. In fact, the joke with our team was that if it didn't require me to pick up a handpiece or my dental license, then I couldn't do it. It was all about developing systems and hiring the right people. And we did it. We got back up to the revenue that we had before, and then we grew it. And we never went back to 5 days a week. We stayed at 2.5. It was wonderful.
That's amazing. It's a testament to saying, what they say, what's the word I'm looking for? Necessity breeds creativity. I think that's the phrase.
The mother of all invention.
Exactly.
Exactly.
I was telling you beforehand, I've been working on this app, and it's like, it became because I needed something and somebody to talk to, and I was like, and I caught myself creating all these different prompts and stuff to make the AI tools out there do it, and it was just a necessity. I wanted something, and it wasn't out there, so I built it. And there's something that's an entrepreneurial thing. You wanted something, you needed something in your life. Your children took priority, and you're like, I've got to make this work, and you found a way to do it. So I want to acknowledge you for that, because that's not something everybody can do, but it is an entrepreneurial trait.
And I didn't even think about telling other people about it, except the doctor next door to us, also a dentist, caught me in the hall one day, and he said, Ruth, where are you? You are never here, but the lights are still on. You're still paying the bills. And he became my first coaching client. And he's the first person I taught the process we have for really streamlining your business, whatever it is, and making it self-propelled, we like to call it, so that it runs on its own. You orchestrate instead of being a part of everything that goes on in the business.
And all the skills that you develop doing that are transferable to any industry, right?
They are. If you sell things, if you provide a service, if you have people that work in your business, all of these strategies that we use, there's only 5, and they're all applicable to making your life more what you want it to be. When we, as entrepreneurs, start out, we are looking for something more than working for somebody else. We want some freedom. We want time freedom or location freedom or financial freedom, all those things. So this is how you get to that. No matter how big, it doesn't matter how big your business is. These principles all apply, and just make it so much more fun.
I meet business owners all the time through my clients and through my own ventures and stuff. And I often hear them talking about 60, 70, 80-hour weeks. And I reflect back when I was in tech, and I'm of the utmost confidence that you cannot be productive 60, 70, hours a week. Every single day, there is a certain window which you can be highly productive and highly effective, and everything else is kind of fluff and doing things that probably other people should be doing. Right?
Absolutely.
My favorite book, a book that probably I would say changed my life a lot, was Dan Sullivan's Who, Not How. And now I think they ought to rewrite it and say who and what, not how, because a lot of times the who could be AI. But that said, not everything should be done by you in a small business. Not everything, you're not the best, as much as you want to think you are, you're not the best person to do all the different tasks.
Well, the majority of us, if we started from scratch, we were wearing all the hats. And it's really hard because you can do it good enough to get it done. So it's hard to relinquish that to someone else. I call it surrounding yourself with experts. It's kind of the Henry Ford outlook on business. Henry Ford never even graduated from high school. And he stayed in his lane. He had one genius, that was him, and he just surrounded himself with experts that did everything else. And if you can't afford an expert, you can at least afford a champion, even if they're part-time. A champion for your marketing could be a teenager, because they have social media like nobody else does, So a little creativity is helpful to think about how can I find experts to work with me toward the goals that I have for my company.
Right. Now, having just had my wife go through some dental stuff, and I'm about to go through some dental stuff of my own, there are certain things in the dental practice that take a long time, right? I'm thinking like root canals and stuff. Is there things you just cut out and look, we're just going to refer those out, we're not going to do them?
We had done that already. Okay. That's one of the really nice things about dentistry is I can do all of it, or I can do only the parts that I like. So I was surrounded by some other specialists, so it made it easy for me to work in conjunction with other specialists. So yes, root canals are not my favorite, so my best friend is an endodontist.
Right.
But I love restoring implants. So a periodontist that places all my implants, we kind of design them together. And I love that part. So yes, for the most part, we had narrowed it down to only the things that make me smile, that make me happy to do. And the rest, yes, we had a great referral.
There's something to be said for that too, because if you got to come in, even if you only had 2 days a week, but you had out of those 2 days a week, you had to do 10 items you just dreaded doing, it would be less efficient and less enthusiastic. You would drag your feet to do them. Well, it's just natural human behavior. If you did what you did and said, you know what, I love doing X, Y, and Z, and everything else they can go either outsourced or bring an outside dentist, we'll refer it off or whatever. Then when I come in, I'm excited to get there. I'm enthused. Your customer support seems to go up, because you're more, positive. I've had a dentist work on me, and I could tell he hated his life, and I could tell he hated his job, but I never went back to him after that. It is not a comfortable feeling to be sitting underneath somebody, looking up when they don't want to be there.
Because you're 8 inches away from their face. No one can be that good of an actor all the time.
Right.
And the suicide rate in the dental industry is gigantic. And there's so much stress. People sit down and they just say, I hate what you do and I don't want to be here. And if they don't say it, then you look at their hands and it's the white knuckle hanging onto my chair. So living with that stress every day is really hard on docs, and their staff.
I'm not going to pick on you too much, but I used to tell people, anybody who loves being a dentist is a masochist. They want to hurt people. They're right? Yeah, they love being a dentist. How could you love doing? Because I could just see that, and somebody's sitting there, they're terrified to be in front of you. They got white knuckles holding on to the chair, and if you're enjoying that, you probably had to have some evaluation there.
It's hard to get past that and focus on how can I make this a fabulous experience for you. Our medications, our anesthesia, oh my gosh, is so much better than it used to be, So there's not much of that goes on in a dental office anymore. The problem is when something goes well, like if you have a root canal, everything went well, it didn't hurt, you didn't even know what they were doing, you don't tell anybody about it. But if anything goes wrong, we tell the world about it.
I bet. I had. We all have one of those experiences. I had one, and I won't say the dentist name here because it's a national chain and they might sue my butt. But I ended up with 2 5-hour sessions back to back to get a single root canal done. And I thought, I don't know anything. I don't know enough about dentistry to know if they made a mistake and it's what's taken so long, or if that sometimes they just take that long. I have a weird genetic thing where I have more roots in certain teeth than others. And, that said, I never went back to that place again. And to be honest, I love their business model. We probably should chat about it because it was systemized. It kind of reminded me a little bit of like a hair salon, right? Meaning that
exactly
dentists can rent different booths. There was probably 3 rows of 10. There was 30 dentists out of this facility. It's a national chain now. But, my dentist basically just rented his chair. He showed up and did the dental work. And I don't know if they shared all the other dental hygienists and all. I forgot what deal. They probably shared some of that. But all the x-ray equipment, all this stuff, the franchise owned that. But he basically ran his chair thing. There's a bunch of different ways to do it. Now, that's kind of what got me interested in when I told you there was a roll-up potential client that wanted to roll up dentist offices, and I got to learn a little bit about the space and DSOs and that type of stuff. What got me interested in it is like, well, if you could turn more dentist offices into that type of space to where it's more kind of real estate-like as far as the parent owner, I'm interested because I'm a prior real estate investor.
It's not as easy as it seems to roll down all these dentists together. It's a lot of A-type personalities to all work together. Yeah. And and I'm guilty of this too. When I got out of school, it was like, man, I'm doing everything my way. I know how it should be done. I taught at the dental school. I know what the heck I'm doing, and I'm not doing it the same way these other guys are doing. So that's one of the wonderful parts about being a private practice is I can do however I feel is most appropriate for my patient. And if I want to throw my profit margin out the window for a client, I can do that because it'll be the way I want it, and I'll be proud, and I will have cared for them the way they need. You know, that doesn't happen often, but sometimes it does. You just say, too bad, this is what we're doing.
And just for those guys listening out there, if we have a lot of people doing roll-ups and acquiring companies out there. If you do the DSO, you'll have no control over what the dentist does. That's one of the laws on every state has about DSOs and MSOs is you can't, as the business owner, you cannot direct treatment. Let's jump into the other. I know you're not just in the dentist space, and we talked about this before the show started. Let's talk about some of the things that we can do as a business owner that you would recommend to make this more enjoyable to own and eventually profitable to sell.
I would suggest, especially if you own a service-based business, to start with systems, to make sure that your operating systems are incredibly robust. So, and I usually have people start with I call it the client journey. Mm-hmm. So from the very first phone call, what has to be, how do you want that handled? What's the tone? What's the impression you want that person to make? And every step along the way that client goes through all the way to the end when they end up on your keeping in touch with whatever your recall system is delineated, and someone's responsible for each step. Doesn't mean they have to do it all, but is responsible for making sure it's done the way the owner wants, and that there's communication between all the steps. So that's probably the biggest thing that people can do is take the owner out of all of those systems and run them through. Just make sure everything is documented. And today, the cool part is, it used to be we had to write everything out in, long handbooks. And now a lot of my clients, it's all on video. It's all screen grabs. And if you forget how to do something, you can just watch a video instead of bothering somebody and say, how am I supposed to do this?
Yeah, Loom is my friend. I use Loom over and over again. I have VAs and people who help with various businesses and projects. And yeah, I'm also extremely ADHD and don't like doing anything more than once or twice. So the rule of thumb is I'll do it the first time to solve the problem. The second time I have to do it, I'm going to record a video. And if it needs to be done a third time, I'm sending that to somebody and saying, this is how it's done, and here's what I want. You may improve upon it. You don't have to do it my way. The end result, what I want looks like this, right? As long as we get the end result that looks as good or better than what I've asked for, I don't care how you do it, right? That's a little different in a lot of business. A lot of businesses, especially in the dental practice, I can imagine, it needs to be done this way, right?
Right.
So
And if you have, what we're finding is that some of the younger generations don't like to be told what to do, which I totally appreciate. In fact, I want them to think. I want them to be creative. So it just means that as the owner, if you're going to give someone free rein to solve a problem, you have to paint a very vivid picture of what the outcome is. And that has to include parameters like your patient can't die in the midst of all of this. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
So as a dentist, giving someone free rein to solve the problem as they see best is very scary. But it just means you have to paint the better picture. You have to give them better parameters for them to work within. They'll figure out that my way to do it was the best way anyway. But the fact that they got to it on their own keeps them engaged. There's so much struggle in small businesses about keeping employees engaged, keeping them in your business. Because if you just tell them to come in and do this, exactly like this, all day long like this, that's boring. Nobody wants to do that. So I think the sooner we get better at, and this is part of building communication and the kind of leadership that you're going to provide for kids that are that young, it just makes a huge difference in your employee retention.
Interesting. It reminds me, I have little kids. I have a 9-year-old and a 14-year-old, and their entire life, I've never been the dad that says, "Oh, you can't do this or that," unless it's dangerous, right? There's times where, like, and my kids know now, if Dad says you probably shouldn't do something, if you do it, it might hurt, right? Because usually I'm the kind of guy that, like, look at them and go, "All right, that's going to leave a nut, but go for it," right? My mindset is, like, I'm the guardrails. I'm there to keep you from going off the cliff. But you can rub against the guardrails occasionally. Think of a long, windy road. There's guardrails in certain dangerous areas. My job is to keep you on the road and make sure you live through the process, right?
Mm-hmm.
You got to learn through some bumps and bruises of your own. Like that said, I never even thought about when you said your client can't die. I never even thought about the dentist. But if you think about it, you guys are administrating anesthesiology. You're working on people who have infections in their mouth, and the mouth is so close to the brain and the head. That's a dangerous place to get a bad infection. So you are working with stuff that could be life-threatening over time, right? An abscess can get into the brain. I know a young lady who had to have major brain surgery and everything else because she had an ear infection, and it got into her brain and had to learn how to walk and talk and everything over again. So the head is a dangerous place to have anything that's festering and infected and has a problem. So rules and procedures are there for a reason. That said, I love that you understand with today's, and probably in previous generations too, maybe not the last two, but you go far back, and I'm sure there was a rebellious generation like the current one we have now. It's like, don't tell me what to do, just tell me what you want, right? This isn't the first one that did that. Having that insight to say, look, here's the end result I need. I need great customer experience. I need the client to go home alive and healing, in better shape and happier than they were when they walked in, right? So.
But just to take it outside and to include some of the trades in this conversation, if you talk to a roofing company, they don't call, your customer doesn't call unless something horrible has happened. Same thing with restoration companies. They have a very upset, in tears person on the phone that they have to calm down and walk them through the process because it's so new and so different and so horrible to those people. So it's not just that skill that we have in the dental world is applicable to so many because a lot of businesses, when we encounter our clients, our customers, this is not their best day, And one thing in this, because communication is my next big piece that needs to be just top notch, is what do you want your customer to feel at the end of each engagement? Like when they get off the phone, that first phone call, how do you want them to feel? And when they're completely finished with their project, they have the new roof, how do you want them to feel? And how are you going to pull that out of them? Because that's where wonderful testimonials come from, Yeah,
and that comes to training your staff into a little bit of what do people want in their communication, right? Because there's different types of people. I am a lead follower, get the hell out of my way type of guy, right? And I don't want to see your insurance codes or know this procedure. I want to know, what do you need me to do, right? Like what needs to be done, and how much is my insurance going to cover and how much is not going to cover, right? Now I'm a 100% disabled veteran. I get 100% disability from them. But before that, I was like, it would drive me nuts when somebody goes, well, here's the 15 line items, and they give me all these codes and insurance codes and stuff, and they're going to cover 10%. Like, I don't need any of that. Just like, tell me what you want to do that you think should be done.
Right.
And how much of it's coming out of my pocket. And I'm going to nod yes or no, right? Or we're going to have to come up with a payment plan, whatever it's going to take. We're going to figure this out. Or, hey, I got to call the wife. I'm going to spend more than $1,000. We have a rule in our family. It's like the $500 rule. If you're going to spend more than $500 unplanned, you probably ought to call the other person and tell them what you're up to.
Yeah.
Right.
So the challenging part of that conversation you just talked about is all the other people who don't think like that.
Right.
So we have to train our employees not just to communicate the way we want to talk to people, but all those other ways. Because some people can't understand or listen to what you're saying unless it's got some kind of a story or a purpose to it.
Right.
Other people, there's just so many different ways to package up and digest information. and have them come out feeling an emotion that is good, and you want that emotion at the end. So there's a lot of training that goes into equipping your employees to be able to handle those conversations and guide people no matter what, I call them communication styles, no matter what communication style they have, what they need in order to understand and process information, no matter what it is your team going to be trained so that they recognize it and go, oh, this lady needs a story, and I can tell her, a success story about how we helped somebody else in her situation get this all figured out. Or they know this is a high-power exec. He's got 5 minutes. I have 5 minutes to make him hand over his credit card, and he just wants the numbers and then to go to work.
Right.
So that's a great skill that we teach our team members, and they can take that on in their life, no matter how long they stay and work with us or move on. We've still equipped them. We've still been a leader and encouraged their professional growth. The other piece of communication is to make sure that the different silos, I'll call them, in your business speak to each other. So in the trades, it would be the salespeople are singing the same song, using the same words as the marketing people, same words as the crew chief the crew leader who gets to the house, and what they're providing is exactly what marketing and sales told the people was going to happen. And many times these silos don't communicate except way up at the top, right. And they miss the interaction with the client or the customer completely. So I like more of a spider web in between those silos because they do start out as silos. But the communication needs to be a web between them that happens way before you get to the top, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. So we're at the phase where we've got great onboarding or customer experience. We've got some systems and processes, starting to formulate. And we're making sure that we have communication styles in there for different types of communicators, different types of the way people listen and interact. What would be the next phase that you would address?
Then I would say to look at your team members themselves. You want really high-performing team members, and how you get to them being high-performing is different in every business. In fact, a drywall company that I work with, they want teenagers who know nothing about work, about anything. They want to create the culture. They want to teach them a work ethic. They want to teach them everything. So they want newbies, and they put in the hours training them and teaching them, because then they get an end result that is exactly what they want, and they have way less churn of employees, You
get way less.
Other people, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, I grew up a painter's son. My father was a painter. We did sheetrock and paint. You get way less variation in the output too, right? If you bring people in that are skilled, they're gonna revert back to what they've always done. If you bring in people and say, this is what I want done and how I want it done, and at least the outcome will be similar all the time, right? There's a big problem in the trades. So if you bring on somebody that's very senior, same way if you brought on a dentist and set him in the chair that's been in the dentistry for 25 years, they do things a certain way. And when you go, no, I want it done, why? That might last 2 or 3 weeks, and then they go back to doing the things the way they've always done them. There's a motor skill, a muscle brain memory that just kicks in, and they'll want to do what they've always done.
So I encourage people when they're trying to make a shift from the way they've always run their business, which ends up being there's one person like in the office who does 12 different things because she learned how to do 12 different things. And instead to have 3 people in there, because you need to separate incoming calls from customer service calls, from dispatch calls, all of those need different mindset, and asking someone to shift mindsets in every phone call. We used to call them schizophrenic octopus. That's what an office manager needs, because you never know who's calling, because there aren't designated lines always. And so I encourage people, when you try to draw an org chart to organize your team, to start with setting it up the way by job description or by responsibility instead of, because we always start with names and we have owner at the top and then Mary and here's Tom and Mary and Tom both do 4 different things. So you're not having an expert in an area be responsible because they all kind of do it really well,
There's a thing inside of computers, and humans have it too, called context switch. And anytime you change, like if I'm answering the phone back to back to back, taking appointment requests, like people, I got a toothache request, and all of a sudden you've got 15 people I need to call. If I'm trying to pepper those in the middle of it, that context switch is very disruptive to the human brain. It's very disruptive even to some of the most advanced computer systems in the world. And it's because there's already certain things and conversations going on in your head. There's certain things in your memory that has to be set aside, and like you got to reformulate what you're about to say to this new person, and then you get a new call for the next tooth appointment. So there's definitely inefficiencies in randomness. So
yeah. And in the beginning, pardon me, when you're starting your own business, you do them all, and it works because you make it work. But if you want to scale, if you don't separate things, you're going to burn through employees because it's no fun. When it's not your business, it's just a job, and that's crazy making, So if you want to scale, or if you want to show a potential buyer an organized business that's ready to go and self-propelled, you got to start thinking about job descriptions or responsibilities as opposed to Mary does this and Tom does that.
I see a lot of times in these businesses we look at to buy, they have great employees, but they may not have what I refer to as the right butts in the right seats, meaning that somebody's doing something because they've always done that. But when you really look at it, they don't enjoy it anymore. They're not really doing that great a job at it anymore, and they really want to do something else. And whether that's inside your company or outside, I always jokingly say there's no such thing as a bad employee, but some employees would be better off working somewhere else, right? There's a right place and a right skill set for most people. That said, it's really difficult sometimes to work with these business owners and coach them and say, look, John over there he's a great guy. Yeah, you promised his dad who worked for you for 30 years that you would take care of little Johnny now that he's working for you. But is he really the right guy to lead your sales? Because he hasn't sold anything in the last 3 weeks or last 6 months, right?
Right. And the reverse of that is also true. So many businesses take their top seller and make them director of marketing. So they don't know anything about leading people, and they don't get to do what they love to do anymore. Now they're trying to motivate people who aren't as good at it as they were. We do it all the time. We just take good people and promote them into a job that they're not skilled for. So we have a simple little test that we do. Actually, that a mentor of mine, a coach of mine, taught me years ago to find out what are your employees, what are their gifts and graces, so to speak, and you just take out a sheet of paper and you divide it into 3 columns, A, B, and C. In the A column, you list everything in your job that you love to do. Like, you could do it with your eyes closed. You're good at it. You love to do it. In the B's, you put, yep, I'm okay at this. Doesn't ring my chimes, but I get it done well. C's are, I hate this. I hate doing these. And if I'm a list maker, it's the things that always stay there and get transferred off my list from day to day to day because I never get around to doing it. And have your employees go through and just divvy up their skills and we're just doing this by what I enjoy. You don't even have to be brilliant at it. And then focus on how can we get rid of their C's, give those to somebody who actually enjoys doing that, and have them focus on their A's, maybe some B's. And doing that one thing of having them focus gets people 90% more satisfied in their jobs. That's incredible research, I think, because being satisfied with what you do is a huge motivator to get up and go back and do it again tomorrow.
I don't know if it was willingly or unwillingly, but you've developed something that's very similar to a Japanese model of fulfillment called Ikigai. You ever seen that? Okay.
Yeah.
So what am I good at? What does the world need? Those type of, what will people pay for, right? And where they overlap is where somebody should focus their energies. Doing that with an employee is, what are you really great at? What do you really enjoy? What's most beneficial to the company? And finding those alignments is like what I said earlier about the wrong butts in the wrong seats.
Yeah.
A lot of times, if you got a big enough organization, Johnny doesn't need, like we were talking about Johnny being the sales guy, he doesn't need to leave the company, right? He needs to become a software engineer because that's what he has always wanted. And you're holding him back because you want him in sales because sales pays more potentially if he was great at it, but he's not great at it, right? So he's never going to get the commissions he deserves. He's never, he's never going to make the sales you need him to make the company move forward, because that's not it's the wrong button, the wrong seat at the wrong time.
Right. So another good place to use this simple little test is in your hiring process. We have candidates go through and list in this job description, it's all written out, tells you what you're going to be doing. What parts of this do you like and what parts you don't like? Because nobody's going to like all of them. And if they're going to lie, I want to know about it now. But at least why not see what they're really good at and what they enjoy doing the most, It's just a very helpful way. And then it starts a conversation so you can speak to it, And when you start to talk to employees about what do you like, what are you good at, how can I help you be better at this, you are showing concern and care for them that isn't in every business in America. So many of the businesses, they just assume, my team knows I love them. We don't spend much time always helping them grow professionally or personally. Either one of those is going to produce a better employee for you. So it's well worth. I know it's time, it's money, it's effort, but so worth it, because churning employees is really expensive.
Right. In the European model, they refer to turnover as revenue. So every time I hear the word turnover, it kind of throws me off a little bit. Here, for all my European listeners, here, turnover is when people leave. So a high turnover is not a good thing.
Not good, right.
And in this mergers and acquisitions phase, one of the things that you have to be really careful for is people are resistant to change. And if you buy a company that didn't go through this process, didn't go through making sure people are already fulfilled in their job, a lot of times there's a good portion of that company who are just one little trick or one little, what am I worried for? Trigger, I guess is the word I'm looking for, to going to find something else anyway, right?
Yep, the straw that broke the camel's back.
Exactly. They weren't totally fulfilled or satisfied where they were, and you just threw a monkey wrench in and said, the only guy I'm hanging out here, my loyalty to the owner is why I'm here, right? This, I'm not miserable, but I'm not happy, and you're leaving, so I'm going to go find something better. Addressing what she's talking about, Ruth here, what you're talking about, addressing that now is critical, that us as buyers make sure it happened, that the employees feel fulfilled, that they, or you address it fast, right? We have all these trailing indicators that we look at when a company's bought that says how many employees left, right? And if I ever build a tool that, if I've been playing with LinkedIn's AI, if they ever let me really see the inside of that, I'm going to build a tool inside of there that gives me a leading indicator, right? And a leading indicator would be how many people are updating their LinkedIn profile when you announce you're going to buy or sell a company, right? Because that's leading. If somebody starts updating their profiles on, I'm going to date myself now, I don't know what the current job engines are, like Monster or one of those jobs out there,
right?
One of those tools out there that has resumes. That's a pretty good indicator that you need to communicate better and figure out what's going on.
And I even have this idea that's very different than the way most of the time when you talk to a company, when owners don't talk to their employees about the sale until it's all done. And there's so many reasons about why you should do that. I have a much different outlook on that. I would like to start talking to employees 10 years before and say, guys, I'm not going to be here forever. Let's set this business up so that it runs just the way you want it. So you feel like you can be here whether I'm around or not, and start building your people and your culture, because that's the next piece that I want them to work on, is build a culture that's so irresistible that people want to stay there. My one of my sons came home from a job interview, and he said, well, I don't know if he's going to pay me, but I just want to work there. I don't care what I do. I just want to work in that company, and man, I called the guy and I said, way to go. You built a culture that's winsome, that's attractive to somebody who doesn't even care what he does during, it's just, I want to be part of what they're doing. And that's really rare in the companies that I help get ready to sell. Culture is at the bottom of what they're worried about.
And I've seen the opposite, right? I came from the tech industry. I worked for Lockheed Martin designing firewalls and mission planning systems for the U-2 spy plane. Went into the defense, out of the defense contracting world into the civilian world. Was a senior director of operations for Excite.com, the Excite portal, and I interviewed at some of the other ones. And I'll say, I interviewed at one of the bigger antivirus, anti-spam type of companies. I ended up working for one of the startups in that space. But I'm not going to say the name because the guy turned out to be a real weirdo, and there's a lot of news about him. But I was actually in the CEO's office to interview with this job to be their director of operations, run all their operations, and I seen a coat rack with 2 or 3 changes of clothes hanging up and a sleeping bag underneath his desk. And I'm like, okay, I just called him out on it. I was like, why do you have a sleeping bag underneath your desk? Why do you why do you have 3 changes of clothes, 3 suits or 3 shirts and ties or whatever you call it on your coat rack? Oh yeah, like we get busy with engineering and stuff. Sometimes we're here for days. There's a shower in the gym. I was like, yeah, I'm not doing that. Right? I'd already seen, some of the world of the, .com startups and stuff like that, and that just wasn't me.
And those are those emotions that you're eliciting in your employees. Those you can't buy those. That's just magnetic. When you entice people, or I should say, when you bring that up in their world, that's a magnetic field that you just can't create by saying, "Oh, I'm going to pay you more than anybody else,"
I bet there are some industries where it's tougher than others. If you're a plumber and you deal with sewage and septic, you by definition have a shitty job, right? So it's going to be a little more difficult to create a wonderful culture there. But it still is done, right?
But they do.
Yeah.
They do, And you absolutely need it, because you have to encourage younger people. If you want them to stay, you have to give them something enticing, more than just cleaning out pipes. There has to be some growth. And I think culture is the perfect place. And it goes right into leadership, which is my next topic, is you have to lead these people. It doesn't just happen on their own. People, especially young people, want to follow someone who's doing big things. And you can do big things even in plumbing, but it needs to be articulated. It needs to be role modeled for them. Those are the biggest parts of leadership and developing your employees. I think that's a huge chunk of the responsibility of leadership in a business, is taking the team that you have and saying, how can I help you? What do you need to grow as a person and then as a professional in my business?
I think it's been about a year now, maybe even a year and a half ago. I talked to about 4 or 5 businesses in a particular space, and 3 of them out of the 5, it was 5 or 6, 3 of them out of the 5 I can remember the name of the business. I'm not going to say it on the show because I don't have the permission to do so. When asked why they're getting out of the business, they're like, well, it's too hard to hire people, and I'm not hiring this generation. They don't want to work, and I don't know how to deal with them. It's not true. They do want to work.
Keep saying that.
It's not true. They do want to work. You just don't know how to work with them, right?
Yes.
It is a different mindset, and it's a different skill set. And I called them out on it. It's like, look, I would bet money that those people want to sustain life. They want to work. They want to do things. If they wanted to start something on their own, you would never have them in your interview process to start with. You just don't know how to work with them, and it doesn't fit the model that you've always done. So now you're in this mode where you're either going to adapt, die, or sell the company, and you've chosen to sell. Well, let's be honest about what's going on here. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And the next guy has to figure it out because he can't buy your business in a declining market because you're refusing to hire people. That it makes it harder for you to sell. You may not even be able to sell it because of that, right? If as a buyer, if I can't see that you're sustaining, growing, and improving, unless I'm a turnaround expert and I know exactly how I'm turning you around, I should run, right? There are people out there that are good at that. I'm not one, right? And I don't currently have any clients I would call turnaround experts. I have some people I interview, and I have some people I'm regularly chatting with that hang out with me because in my network that's what they do. They turn around businesses. But it is a skill set like you wouldn't believe. These guys are ironclad warriors in their space, and they can look at something and know step by step what has to happen, and it is a rare skill set to have. And sometimes they still fail, right? I know a few where they bought it, they got it going, and they end up having to file bankruptcy and get rid of it.
Our statistics for us businesses that go to market, that only 20% of them actually get sold. Those are such horrible statistics that I just encourage business owners, before you get to the part where you put your business on the market, to really take a look at all the parts and make sure your business is self-propelled, that you have the team, that you have all these things, because those turnaround guys are so rare. What's the odds that you're going to cross paths, or your broker's going to have one in his back pocket that's going to fit with your design of a business?
I'm going to say two things about that 80-20 rule. It's not true. It's worse than it is. So the 80-20 rule is that 20% of the businesses that get listed only 20% ever sell. That is absolutely true, and it's partially because the other 80%, a large portion of those should have never been listed. They weren't ready to sell. Right? Business brokers are taking listings because they're getting listing fees that they should have never taken, and taking businesses to market that are not marketable, and that's causing the problem. The scarier part of that is those business brokers are still turning away businesses that every business broker has their own threshold, and they have businesses that they think are not marketable, and they're turning those away. So the numbers are even worse than that. If you had, there's probably another 10 or 20% of businesses that went to them that they just turned away to start with, right? Or so there's, it's an ugly process that by the time somebody thinks they are ready to sell, they usually need to sell, right? They've waited too long.
I know that is the biggest. When people ask me for like a list of mistakes, the biggest one is we wait too long. We think I'm ready to retire, so that means my business is ready to sell. And that couldn't be further from the truth. It's even from a numbers point of view, the odds of your revenue being trending in the right direction at the right time when you decide you want to go on permanent vacation, that's never going to happen, or hardly ever happens, So I think
it's a 3-year process for a good company. It's a longer process for one that's just an independent operator who thinks they... I've met so many in the pest control space. I bought a small pest control company. I bought it way too small. As a matter of fact, I kind of didn't even buy it. I bought a list of customers and stuff, bought their equipment, and then built it on my own because the one we were looking at wasn't working. I talked to 15 independent operators that were, too small really, that we were going to buy their list. And every one of them thought they had something to sell.
Yeah.
And I was like, you really don't, right? You have a list of customers, some of which call you back every spring because ants crawl out of the ground in Oklahoma every spring. And, termites come back after, a little bit if you don't put permanent treatment in the ground, if you're just spot treating, which they shouldn't be doing. But that said, you do have recurring customers. You do have, a book of business, but you don't have anything else to go with the element. And a lot of that book of business is they came to you because you were the lowest price at the moment in their moment of crisis. They like you. And when I come in, and if they don't, either don't like me or they're going to put it up for competitive bid again, right? I'm fairly positive that, out of a book of 100 customers in a single person operator, you're only going to keep 60-70% if you're perfect. So they don't have anything to sell to where if you do what you're talking about and they spend the 2 or 3 years to make a company run really well, the customers aren't talking to John, the owner, every time they call. They're talking to Nancy at the front desk, and a different tech is coming out and dealing with the problem. They're not dependent upon the owner anymore. And the owner dependency is such a critical problem with so many of these small businesses. I've seen businesses that are 30, 40, 50 people doing $4.5 million in revenue that are still so owner dependent they're not sellable, right?
Yeah. And it could be just the connections, the relationships that the owner has. It could be that the owner is an amazing closer and all sales start with the team, but he finishes all of them.
Yep.
Or it could just be that he's marvelous and the team is there because he's there. There's so many ways an owner can overstep the bounds of what's really healthy for a business. So that's a huge thing. And the people I talk to, the people I coach about getting ready to sell, they don't even think of that. Everyone's worried about their revenue, making sure they have enough revenue to attract somebody's attention to buy. And there's so much more that you have to offer as an owner that just gets tossed on the table and left there.
One that keeps coming to mind was they did auto detailing, tinting, and then they would do some light modifications for like car radios and stuff. They were doing, I want to say, $6.5, $7 million, maybe even $8 million on their peak year in revenue. Decent profit margins and stuff, but when I boiled down to it, number one, the owner was wearing 3 or 4 hats. They were paying people out of the register at the end of the day. That was another big problem. But the other thing was when I found out his sales process, right? The reason he was trying to sell is he wanted to spend more time playing golf. He was a golf, they call them golf pros. He taught golf at 2 or 3 local golf courses. He was a resident pro at two of our local golf courses. And 90% of his clients are big auto dealerships who wanted their windows tinted, and the way he landed them is he'd take them out and give them free golf lessons. Like, look, I'm physically handicapped to the point where I use a walker to walk more than 100 feet. Maybe not so much back then, but I'm not, and I don't play golf. I might take them fishing. But the guy who loves golf isn't going to want to go catch, a 30-pound flathead handling, dead fish on a hook. So we have a problem here. You've built a sales cycle that only you can do.
Yeah.
Right. And when it comes time, when one of his clients are thinking about leaving, he takes them back out to the golf course and they get to play 18 holes. That's a good time to build a relationship with somebody. Short of buying a bass boat and taking them to the center of the lake saying we're not leaving until you catch a monster fish, I don't have anything where I have a captive audience for long enough to have that conversation. Right. So understanding your sales cycle and your process that you built and is that transferable is a critical. I didn't buy it, and my client that was with me, he wasn't interested, and I don't know if the guy ever was able to sell because he had built something that only he could do. And it's not. It doesn't have to stay that way. One thing I told him over and over again before I left is it doesn't have to stay that way. Bring in 2 sales guys, have them start mirroring, doing some of what you do, but have them build your book of business without you.
Right.
And prove that you have sustainable business, and then have them start taking over some of these golf clients that don't need you anymore. Right.
Yeah. So
there's a way to transfer all that. So let's wrap this up. And we're running long on time. I looked at the time. I was like, we've already talked for an hour. It's fun chatting with you. You're very intelligent in the space. Tell me, how do people work if they've got their plumbing, their dental, their chiropractic, their small business? They're doing 4 or 5. They're doing under 10 million. They're not ready for an investment banker. They're in that small to medium business realm, and they want some help. How do they reach out and work with you?
I would say go to self-propelledbiz.com. We have a resource there for them. It's a great way to start. That will also, you'll get an email from me, and anyone that wants to work individually with me, that's the best way, is to reply to an email, and we're all about it. We love to help people one at a time because everyone's business is so different. And that's the best way.
And then if somebody can only remember 1 or 2 things from today's show, what would you want them to walk away with their takeaways?
I would say that you need to look at your business through the eyes of a potential buyer. What would they want to see in your business? And kind of adjust where you are where you think that would be, because we build our businesses the way we want to do business. And the biggest change is to look at it from somebody else's perspective who doesn't have your talents, your gifts, your graces, and what would they want to see in a business that they would buy.
Awesome. Well, thank you for being here today. Hang out for a few seconds after the show, and we'll call that a show.
Cool. Thank you so much.
Sponsored by DueDilio. Looking to buy or sell a business? Assembling the right team is essential for success, and that's where DueDilio comes in. DueDilio is the go-to platform for hiring top M&A service providers, including attorneys, deal advisors, and due diligence experts. With a network of over 250 highly vetted professionals and boutique firms, they connect you with the expert you need for a seamless M&A journey. Whether you're acquiring your first business, growing your portfolio, or preparing for a sale, DueDilio makes building your deal team easy and efficient. And best of all, their matching service is completely free. Visit DueDilio.com and assemble your winning team today.